So let's get out in front of it just right here. Mel Gibson, not a great person. Not me saying
want to
it.
hang out with.
No,
Yeah.
not me saying that. I think just generally overall, Mel Gibson seems like a kind of a clown, an ass. I mean, he makes an ass of himself all the time, and then people vouch for him. And then he makes an ass of himself again, and then people vouch for him. It's hard to get on the Mel Gibson train. That being said, I just want to get out in front of it here, because it doesn't matter, because we can separate the art from the artist, and we're about to do that for the next hour, because we're going to be talking about a film that Father Malone was shocked, I say, to learn that I had never seen it. I had seen Fury Road, but that doesn't, I guess that counts, but it doesn't really, I mean, we'll get to it when we get to it. There's a lot going on here. It counts, but are we even talking about the same franchise is my point? I don't know. Yes.
Well, let's get into it.
You know what I mean? Yes, but. So yeah, on this episode of the Culture Cast, I am joined by Father Malone for this very special Father Malone programmed bonus episode of a series of 1, 2, 3, 4 leading up to Furiosa, which will be a projection booth X Culture Cast thing, because we're going to try to cover more new movies every month, which means we make more work for ourselves in the long run by covering other things too. There's an alternate universe where we covered all the Planet of the Apes movies leading up to Planet of the Apes instead.
That would have been good.
Yeah. Instead, we're doing Mad Max, which I think for a lot of people, myself included, is the bigger of the two big box office movies of this month.
A higher profile, I think. I think most people don't even know there's a Planet of the Apes movie coming out, but everybody knows Furiosa's on the way.
Yeah, which, I mean, is a credit to George Miller and Anya Taylor-Joy, who that's why I'm going to see it, because she's amazing. Period. The end, right?
Oh, I'm going to see it because it's another Mad Max.
Sure.
Adjacent story by George Miller.
Adjacent. And then leading up to another Mad Max movie in the near future.
I hope so. Get going right now.
Yeah,
what do you
Mad Max, The Wasteland.
Please. Yeah, I will watch that immediately.
But on this episode of the Culture Cast, this bonus episode, we are talking about 1979's original Mad Max.
Mad Max. He's the only law in a future world gone mad. They killed his partner, attacked his wife and child. Now it's his turn, and Max is mad. Mad Max, the maximum force of the future. Rated R.
Directed by George Miller, screenplay by George Miller and James McCausland, by a story by George Miller and Byron Kennedy. It stars, like we've already mentioned, Mel Gibson, Joanne Samuel, Hugh Keys-Byrne. His name's going to show up a whole bunch in these 4 episodes. So will Mel Gibson's a couple times. And a couple times, not all of them. Twice, 2 more times. Yeah, Mad Max, what is it about? It's about a dystopian near future Australia, a few days in the future even. Just a couple days from now, we're all going to be living in Australia, and motorcycle gangs are going to be roaming the highways, running over children, killing people, and just causing havoc. But hey, there's one man for the job, and his name is, the last name is what makes me laugh, because it's so funny. It's funny, right?
Max Rockatansky?
Rockatansky. It's just like the most goofiest of goofy things to like Max Rockatansky. Yep.
Hey, man, he's Polish represent.
Yeah. How's it spelled? Just like it's said.
Just like it sounds. Just that crazy. Rockatansky.
Yeah. And Mel Gibson plays the titular Mad Max, who we'll talk about it. There's a lot going on in this movie. Again, I didn't even know what to expect, to be perfectly honest with you, because like I said, haven't seen any of these movies other than Fury Road. So, Father Malone, I'm going to kick it to you for a couple questions. A, why is Mad Max so important to you? B, why is Mad Max important to cinema overall, which is part of the reason your response to me not seeing it was the way it is, because you, like myself, are a person who considers themselves well watched as a cinema goer. And this is something that clearly you have a reason to feel is important to the film conversation as a whole. So I'm curious what that is. And then what did you think rewatching it for this episode? And when was the first time you saw it?
Ooh, I guess I'll go backwards there. First time seeing it was on cable television. Interestingly, Chris, over on Midnight Viewing, we were in our latest episode, we were talking about heavy metal. And in that, I tell a story about the night I discovered Heavy Metal magazine. This was the same evening.
Oh, nice.
At my cousin's house, where we watched Mad Max, and then I found a stack of Heavy Metal magazines.
The formative evening.
Yeah, it's pretty vivid in my mind.
Yeah.
So I must have been 9 years old and Mad Max at the time felt very new and very modern, and in a lot of ways a rejection of Hollywood sort of prim and proper kind of filmmaking. It was, look, there's always been independent film here in America, but for some reason, right then, at that moment, Mad Max represented this influx of sort of crazy, batshit Australian movies, the best of which was Mad Max. And it was unlike anything American cinema was doing as far as the commitment to the physical stunt work. I mean, look, there was a lot of stunt work going on in America, but it wasn't as fucking insane as it was here. Like it just
Hal Needham was doing stuff like this.
Yeah,
but that's it, really.
Yeah, Hal Needham was doing stuff with very trained stunt people who had been in the industry for decades, and you never get a sense, as cool as the stunts are in a Hal Needham film, that anyone is in danger. Everyone is in danger in Mad Max. Everyone is in danger when the camera is on and George Miller is behind it. If it's not, bravo even more as a filmmaker, because it feels dangerous. That's another thing about this movie. It feels unsafe.
Right.
And the impact of this movie, I don't think, is as pronounced as the reaction to The Road Warrior would be, at least here in America. I know Mad Max was popular, definitely, and a lot of people saw it, but more people, I think, saw it because they needed to see where this Road Warrior movie came from,
right,
than the other way around. So I'll say Road Warrior is actually the more impactful overall. But to your first question about what the character means to me, I can't just speak to his appearance in this movie. I kind of have to talk about Max overall.
Sure.
Because it's one of the most unique film series of all time, in that not only do we get a post-apocalyptic hero that we follow from film to film, but we essentially get this is going to sound crazy, but a sort of very modern day Gulliver, Lemuel Gulliver from Gulliver's Travels, because people think of that story and all they remember is giant Gulliver and the Lilliputian, whereas Gulliver goes to many, many lands and has many different adventures. So what we're getting here in Mad Max is it's a dystopian, but it is not post-apocalyptic. What's funny is in 1979, he's saying this is a few minutes from now. It actually is a few minutes from now.
Yeah, it's not this movie is not post-apocalyptic at all. Like,
no, this movie could very well be right now. In fact, let's see in 6 months if we're not there.
Right. Oh, this is a much better movie if we're talking about the near future than a movie like Civil War is, because I think this is actually grounded in the way the world could be if things went a certain way, which is lawlessness reigns supreme. And that ends up being the big thing about this movie, is that, yeah, I was expecting a post-apocalyptic thing. And when it opens...
The Road Warrior.
And when it opens the way it does, I was like, okay, maybe it still is. And then the moment they cut to the inside of a diner, I was like, wait a second, is this just like the normal world now? And that's when it hit me. Oh, okay, so there must, and I realized, all right, so there's more going on here. It's not, like you said, it's a couple minutes in the future, literally.
Right, so here in Mad Max, that's the world we're given. And then when we come back to Mac, Jesus Christ, it's so different. It is the post-apocalypse now. Now there is no society, and now it's basically a Western. So what we were given in the first film is kind of a crime, cops on the road, chase movie, action flick. The second film becomes this post-apocalyptic Western flick. The third one is so far afield from those two. It's about him trying to like basically save these children in this like paradise situation, and then Fury Road is a nonstop fucking chase movie again. It sort of returns to Mad Max's initial idea, but amps it up and fucking goes crazy with it. Each of the movies are so distinct. What amuses me when people criticize them from film to film is that, like, well, this one was great, and then this one sucked, but because this one isn't a Mad Max movie. That's the criticism I keep hearing. Like, well, that one is a Mad Max movie, but that one's not a Mad Max movie. It's like, none of them are Mad Max movies. Mad Max is the only Mad Max movie. The next one has nothing really to do with the other one.
And that's the thing that I didn't look into this intentionally. I wanted to go into it as blind as possible. And that is the thing that shocked me with this movie, is that this is, when people remember Saw, they remember it as a horror movie. It's a cop procedural film. The original film is. Everything else past that, another fucking story entirely. Saw 2 on, those are horror movies, straight up. Saw 1 or Saw, not a horror movie, cop procedural. This has that same feeling to me, where it's like, this, not at all what I was expecting. And here's the thing I will say. It's not that I didn't enjoy this movie. I'm more excited to see where we're headed with this stuff than this movie. Because in terms of Ozploitation, which this is kind of the original one, or the kind of the biggest name.
It's the most well-known here in America. Definitely.
Yeah, it feels kind of tame compared to some of the other Ozploitation movies I've seen.
Oh, definitely.
Right? Like, it really is, which is the crazy thing, because I feel like the way you're kind of talking about where we're headed is shit's going to get real crazy real fast. Essentially, the next movie.
Yeah, there's no comparison. This movie is all like pushing the pedal as steadily as you can, whereas in the next film, it goes from, it doesn't go from 0 to 100. It starts at 100.
And this movie kind of starts at 100 as well. I would say it starts with a pretty long chase between the Knight Rider.
The Knight Rider.
The Knight Rider, who's just running roughshod on. So these are the main force patrol. So they're like
basically they're the highway patrol.
Chips, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So they're trying to take him down, and the best guy for the job is the man we see putting on his gear, putting on his lotion on his hands, getting ready, because it's Mad Max. It's Max Rokitansky. It's Mel Gibson, who, look, for all of his problems as a human being, man, he's a charismatic actor, and it's fucking unfair, frankly, that he's kind of an asshole too. Because if he were a charismatic guy, that would be more fun. If he was a charismatic actor and a great person as well. It's not the case, but hey, it is what it is. He's a great actor. When he's on, he's fucking on. And in this movie, he kills it.
Yeah, there's no question. Look, he's a good actor. He is a charismatic actor. And you just can't not look at him. The fact that he's a fucking piece of shit doesn't aid that, but I can also sort of pull myself out of it and watch this movie because, Max is kind of a cipher here. Yeah, not real emotional. It's called Mad Max. Is he angry or is he crazy? What's your definition of mad?
In this movie, he's angry.
This movie, he's angry.
I'm assuming at some point he's not going to be angry. He's going to be literally nuts.
Yeah, I think we get there.
Driven to insanity. Because that's the other thing. Mad Max Fury Road is chronologically and canonically the 4th movie, but he's been recast, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
With a younger man. And It takes so much further into the future. But here's the interesting, and this is another thing that makes me love the series overall, is that other than this movie, which is the story of Max Rokitansky before the war, this is the only verifiable part of his tale. All of the rest have different narrators, and therefore could be just folk tales about this mythic character wandering the wastelands after the apocalypse. So while we got them in the order we got them, who knows when they actually occurred?
Right. And that for me is also the interesting thing about this series, is the idea of that kind of being the case further down the road. Is it's less, this specifically happened, but again, like you said, a folk tale of the person roaming the wasteland, who everybody knows, because if he were this guy, he would be this well known if he were able to do the things that I'm assuming he's going to be doing in the next couple movies.
Around this time, this Max kind of represented, and Snake Plissken represented, there was a whole movement of anti-heroes.
Right.
These days, everyone's an anti-hero. Like,
yep.
You can't have a traditional hero. He has to be flawed and fucked up. But at the time, to have somebody who is flawed and fucked up and force them to be our hero was at least to me. Look, I guess I was 9 years old, but it was definitely felt new. It felt like part of the danger of the movie. So that goes a long way in sort of cementing the character. Chris, you mentioned that this movie was not what you were expecting. To that end, I have to ask: were you in any way expecting the first scene of Max at home would involve his wife serenading him with a saxophone solo?
Nope. not in a million fucking years. Yeah, boy. Again, like that was the thing I didn't know. I wasn't aware that the point of this movie was effectively to set up everything else.
And what's funny is it doesn't actually, like, had you seen it at the time, it wouldn't have felt like
right.
That. This was just a couple minutes into the future adventure story and revenge picture.
But, I mean, again, a film being made in Australia, I love the fact that they use the same goddamn mask from Strange Behavior, because Max puts that, I forget who the fuck that is, but that's the mask that they use in Strange Behavior. That same... Yeah, isn't it the same? It's that same guy. I don't forget who the hell he is. It's like a horror icon, right? Because they're going in that movie. They're going around like stabbing with that. He's wearing in that like first scene in the movie, or
Max?
when he's at home.
Oh, Max at home.
Yeah, he has that like mask on.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's the same one that they use in Strange Behavior. I forget what.
Yeah, I guess I was unaware of that. Like. Yeah. I don't think I've seen Strange Behavior for like 30 years or something.
But that's an Australian film as well. It was just weird that was like, that was the weird crossover. Yeah. But I mean, again, I'm amenable to something like this, even if it's not what I was expecting, because I really like Australian filmmaking. I feel like Australians, like, as a people, they're very much themselves, and their filmmaking, really, that's also the case. Like, when a film is shot in Australia, whether you know it, Peter Jackson, I think, makes movies that are specifically him, that are in kind of informed by his New Zealander sensibilities, and Australian films made clearly by Australians are informed by their Australian sensibilities, and George Miller's the same way. I mean, I love George Miller as a director because he makes some of the strangest choices possible. Babe 2 Pig in the City is a fucking nutsoid movie, and it's directed by the guy who directed Fury Road. Okay, sure.
And the director of The Witches of Eastwick.
And Lorenzo's Oil.
And the Nightmare at 20,000 Feet segment of the Twilight Zone movie.
Which I think for me, that's my favorite segment in that movie. Is that John Lithgow, right?
Yeah, how could it not? It's spectacularly made.
The stuff with Dan Aykroyd's pretty good too, to be fair.
That's just a wraparound. That doesn't count.
That's fair. Hey, wraparounds can ruin some stuff, though. Looking at William Sadler in a wheelchair screaming at people.
Oh, stop it. That's fantastic.
But George Miller makes interesting choices consistently, I feel like. Because, I mean, we didn't even mention Happy Feet, for fuck's sake. Like,
yeah, right. It's just, he seems to just go where he wants to go. And even if it's a failure, you got to go, yeah, you make it a penguin dancing movie?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and the reasoning behind that was because of him seeing how the mocap technology was being used in Lord of the Rings. And so he was like, I kind of want to make that's how we're going to do the Penguin movie. It's like, okay, sure. Whatever, George. Like, and again, there you go. And he wrote the goddamn movies too. On top of everything else, he's a writer-director, which for the most part, I think a lot of people attribute certain things to certain directors that they definitely didn't write. Like essentially most things Steven Spielberg has done, he has not written a damn thing for the most part. He really, wait, hold on. He has, if we're talking about the things that he's famous for.
He wrote AI. He wrote that screenplay. He wrote, like I said, Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Sure.
If you read his screenplay for Poltergeist before the rewrite, it's very close. Like the rewrite is, I think Spielberg could have arbitrated and gotten sole credit on that.
I mean, I always say that that's his only real horror. Like Poltergeist is Spielberg's actual horror movie because it's a fucking Spielberg movie. I know that Toby Hooper horror movie. I mean, he's working on an alien. He's working on an alien thing now that might be as horror-y as Close Encounters gets. But I think Close Encounters is probably it.
Remember back in the day, he had initially hired John Sayles to write that, like the attack on the farmhouse
Yeah.
movie. Is it that? Because oh boy, would I love to see Steven Spielberg do a movie about just a family fight. Now, I guess they just did Nope, so you can't really do it again. But
Yeah, that kind of is the Hopkinsville Goblin story, but blown up.
yeah,
I don't know. I mean, that's the thing. When I think of certain directors, I think they're unfairly given writer credit for whatever reason, and there are not a lot of high-profile writer directors. There's like a handful, and those are the people that are considered auteurs. As much as it pains me to say it, Quentin Tarantino, Chris Nolan, George Miller, Stanley Kubrick.
Ryan Johnson.
Oh, are you being serious or sarcastic?
No, I'm serious. Ryan Johnson. I'm including him as an auteur.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't like his Star Wars movie, but I understand everything else in his. I mean, I loved Brick. That movie is amazing.
When
I never seen it.
Oh, fucking A. Okay.
This just that wasn't is that the one with Hayden Christensen?
No.
Is that
Looper.
Jumper?
Looper?
Is that one Jumper?
That's Jumper. Looper is with Bruce Willis and
The
Joseph
next,
Gordon-Levitt.
that name is why I didn't watch it. I'm not a super big JGL guy. Never have been.
Oh, you should give it a shot.
Okay. I mean, I will on your suggestion alone. I've heard that it's good. I mean, again, Brick's amazing. And that's Joseph Gordon-Levitt. Like, again.
But, it's weird because in Looper, he's got, they tried to make him look like Bruce Willis as opposed to the way around. So he's got the contacts in and they've kind of made his face a little more Brucey. And it's a weird performance, but it's a great performance.
They give him a prosthetic nose, I'm pretty sure.
Most likely.
Yeah. But like Ryan Johnson, I think George Miller makes interesting choices, which, as someone who watches a lot of movies like you do, I appreciate a director who writes something that he directs and that it's him in a movie or her or them. And I think George Miller is present in everything I've seen of his.
Yeah, because even if he's not sitting right in that screenplay, you look at these movies and you just go, he's improvising everything here. Like, he's putting this movie together in the editing. That's what the script is. Have you try checking out the screenplay for Fury Road sometime?
I can't even imagine.
The sketch. I mean, it's just like, a pamphlet.
In my mind, George Miller does what Ridley Scott has never been able to do, which is actually be successful at making an epic film in a modern setting. Because Fury Road is a modern epic, and I like everything that Ridley Scott has tried to do has fallen short because he's just trying to do a big ancient war movie.
Yeah, he's trying to make a like 1950s CinemaScope classic. He wants to do Lawrence of Arabia. It's just that he doesn't have the patience to do Lawrence of Arabia. He wants that classic now. So he gives us all of the pretty pictures, but who cares about any of these movies?
Right. But with something like George Miller's Fury Road, he takes the idea of the chase movie and turns that into the epic, which for me is much more interesting, which is taking something that has really, I mean, there are a couple epic chase movies, but I think Fury Road is like it's the epic chase movie, like period, of like all time.
It's pretty high up there. It's kind of hard to beat.
I mean, the things that would come close in my mind are something like The Hitcher, in terms of like the frenetic pace, never letting up, but that's a much shorter movie. It's not 3 hours,
Pretty low key.
Yeah, Fury Road's a big, loud movie, best enjoyed in IMAX. Even I would concede that's a movie that needs to be watched in the biggest, loudest screen possible.
Yeah, there's a lot more going on in Fury Road than going on in The Hitcher. The Hitcher is very simple.
Yeah. But I mean, for me, when we talk about George Miller and like this being his starting place, even here, I can see it. I can see the sensibilities that he will continue to bring to everything he works on from here on out.
Absolutely. But, what we're going to be lacking in all the other George Miller movies is Goose.
Oh, my God.
Love Goose.
He really kind of is, for me, the most memorable part of the movie because Steve Bisley is just, for as much of a cipher as Max is, Steve Bisley's Goose is not at all a cipher. He is. Oh, no. He runs away with the movie anytime he's on screen.
Absolutely. You could have called this movie The Goose.
And then what an ignominious way to go out, too.
Fucking poor. That is not the Goose.
He just dies off screen. And he's dead. And then he's dead. It's just ignominious. I mean, I appreciate that, though, because they don't hang anything on it. It just happens and the movie continues.
Yeah. It's unfortunately that world.
Well, that kind of comes back at the end of the movie where spoilers for a movie from 1979, so it's way past the statute of limitations for spoilers as far as this show is concerned. Max's family dies. And we learn that off essentially ADR. The child died and the wife's essentially brain dead. Like, okay. Lie to him though. Tell him it was fine.
Right. I mean, that's the finality of it. But I mean, we witness the sort of, without being too graphic, at least.
Which I was surprised by.
I was surprised he restrained himself, but like at least he understands, like, we don't need to see that happen. Like, you can just give us the thing rolling into frame.
Which I thought worked. I mean, for me, I was surprised. To your point, I was surprised the restraint that was used, because I was expecting something closer to Sam Raimi with this, like really like amping it up and going for it. I'm not saying George Miller doesn't go for it. He goes for it in different ways. And the violence, the graphic nature of the violence is not something he's interested in showing in this movie, which is, I was kind of shocked by, honestly.
Yeah, you see a lot more of people beating up on cars than other humans.
Right. That was kind of me alluding to it being a tame Ozploitation movie. I'm not even sure it is Ozploitation.
Oh, it's 100% Ozploitation.
I'm talking about like the ploitation of it.
It's just the one where they went, yeah, let's just focus on the story here.
Right. Which I was surprised by, because I was expecting it to be a post-apocalyptic thing from the start. And because, correct me if I'm wrong, the whole thing about the next movie is they're looking for gasoline.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So that's what I was expecting here. And it wasn't, right. It wasn't that at all. It's Hugh Keys-Byrne playing a dickhead, which fuck. We're going to be talking about him a whole lot too. He's fucking amazing in this movie. Again, speaking of someone who just kind of steals it every time he's on screen.
Yeah, Shakespearean here. Like, he elevates the movie. This could be just a stock raving villain, and yet he seems to have a depth to him. You know, we spend a lot of time with our villains here, and I don't think we agree with anything they're doing, but they all seem fascinating in some way, and that's because he's at the center of it.
Well, and I think it's very telling that he comes back in Fury Road.
It's perfect, actually. He could have been in all of them, honestly. He could have been the villain in each of the films, and it would have been totally acceptable. Just like the myth of Max, the myth of all of his villains could be one villain.
Right. Well, and I kind of thought that was what it was going to be, because, again, given that he shows up here in the last one, I was like, oh, so he's got I know Tina Turner's in the third one.
Oh, yes.
That's all I know.
Auntie Entity.
Is that her name in the movie?
Goddamn right it is.
Oh, dear God. George Miller, man, just making what he wants to make, which like I said, I really appreciate as someone who watches a lot of movies, because a lot of stuff just feels very workmanlike and rote. And this is far from, even if this movie doesn't push the envelope as much as I was expecting it to, it's not, like you said, not at all like things that were being made in 79.
No, and keep in mind, of course, that George Miller is a doctor.
Right.
He is a doctor.
Yeah.
And helped the budget of this film by working at emergency rooms and effectively treating people who were in car accidents. And then when he had enough money, went out and made the greatest car accident movie of all time.
I mean, hey, I appreciate his ability to pivot. And I mean, that's a hell of a pivot.
That is one hell of a pivot.
That's like, what is that, fucking Ken Jeong, like 40 years into his life, just because I want to do stand-up. And he's a fucking doctor too, isn't he? Like, straight up. Yeah. Hell of a pivot. What a pivot. And that's the thing about George Miller. Like, for me, watching this movie, like, I get where he's coming from with this movie. Like, I get him as a director by just watching his sensibilities in this movie, because, like, we haven't even talked about this yet. This movie was made for fucking nothing. 400,000 Australian.
Yeah. What was the global take? I can't even imagine.
They said it's around 100 million, which is...
That's a good investment.
Yeah, boy. That's like hitting the lottery, literally.
But hitting the lottery with an awesome fucking cult classic.
Right. Well, and then on top of everything else, because this movie's so good, it ends up setting the stage for more movies to come, which is... I mean, again, that's like hitting the lottery 2, 3, 4 more times. I'm convinced George Miller will end his career making a Mad Max movie. I think he's thematic as a director.
Die on it. Yeah.
Right?
But only after the editing. I don't want him to die while making the movie. I want him to
No.
die after saying, that's it. And then you can fall over, George.
Right there in that moment.
Yeah.
That's like Dewey Cox. He died 5 minutes later. But that's the thing. Like for me, I think about George Miller as one of those like consummate filmmakers like Guillermo del Toro. And if you have a page of unrealized projects on Wikipedia, movies that didn't get made, but yet we have a Wikipedia entry for all of them, that's we're talking about someone who's engaged creatively in a way that a lot of directors don't have any interest. And I'm not saying that's a good or bad thing, but not every director wants to write the stuff that he directs, or vice versa, frankly.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're lucky we still have him, but even if we didn't, even if he hadn't made Fury Road, I'm convinced that original trilogy of Mad Max films like will and can withstand the test of time. You know, like I'm glad he's still working, but the legacy is absolutely secure.
Yeah. Well, and that's the other thing, you know, having not seen these three movies that lead up to Fury Road, I assumed that was the case, that these movies were being made subsequently because they were good. And clearly that's the case. I mean, sometimes shit just gets made because it made money. Transformers is a very good example of that. And it is seemingly done the thing where it came back around and now it's good again with Bumblebee.
With Bumblebee?
Yeah. So I didn't know if Mad Max was like that because, again, to your point, the other thing that I had always heard was the complaints about the third movie. Yeah,
which is, again, that's crazy to me. It's like, dude, the gulf between The Road Warrior and Mad Max is so vast. Like, you can't complain that it's switched gears. Like, you know, sorry, like, Max did some other stuff. Like, it can't all be cod pieces and give us the gasoline. What's funny is the three movies following Mad Max are all about power. Like literal power, like gasoline, like the Thunderdome is run on like a methane, like that's the whole thing. Like
sure.
It's a plot point in that. Fury Road, it's all about getting the gasoline, like the gasoline. But Mad Max is the only one that isn't. Mad Max is just about watching society fall around you and whether or not you can stand up to that or not.
Right, and it's about Max having his family taken away.
Yeah, it's Max having everything taken away.
Right. Which again, like if this is kind of the origin story of Mad Max, which it effectively is, I think it's a pretty compelling origin story because where it leaves him at the end is, I guess he's nuts.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it feels like, right?
I'm glad you watched it first, though, because, and you know, it's easy to forget with how badass the rest of the movies are and his place in them, that this is where he came. Like, Max loses everything and then loses everyone. You know, like all of those characters are just living in Mad Max's story after the fact, you know?
Right. Well, and that's the thing. I didn't expect Mad Max to have a family. Like I didn't know he had a wife and son. And I was like, well, I guess they're going to die by the end of this movie. Like they're going to be fodder for everybody. Like that's the thing. Like they're chased and terrorized multiple times in the movie, which at some point I was like, how many more times do these people need to get terrorized before they're just murdered?
One more time.
Right. And then this is the time that they get murdered. I do like that the chase aspect of the movie where these two kind of storylines keep intersecting with each other. And it doesn't seem like they need to, but the fact that they keep intersecting means they're going to be on a eventual collision course permanently, which is where the movie ends up. And I think that in the third act of the movie, it really picks up. I mean, the movie kind of really picks up even more than it. I mean, again, it's already kind of, to your point, it's not full pedal to the metal, but it's moving at a pretty good clip. But the third act of this movie is pretty great.
Yeah. And where the sort of velocity the third act ends up at is kind of where we go from then on with Max, you know?
Which is what I'm excited to see. And I'm glad you kind of said you were happy I watched this one first, because I would kind of be curious how I would have received this movie rewatching it after having seen everything else. Because it's such a weird spot for this to start in where I know it's going to end up. That, yeah, like the next one, you talking about the next one in the tones you've talked about it. I'm excited to see how much of the pedal hasn't been let off, because the movie at the end is just like, yeah, and he's nuts and he's going to fucking just do it's not even made clear what happens at the end of the movie, what he's going to go do. He just drives off.
Right.
To go do whatever.
It could be anything.
Right.
Where it ends up, however, is so far not even a field. It's so appropriate because once his wife and child are killed, and Goose is dead, and he effectively is no longer a cop because he's just going out to murder this person, not in the name of the law anymore. Like everything is gone. It's a literal world falls down situation. And that's where the Road Warrior takes us from. So it's crazy that we can have a character whose world falls apart emotionally, mentally for them, but then it is reflected in the outside world.
Which is, and that's what I'm excited to see with the next ones, because watching the psyche of Max like go and seeing where he ends up at the end of the movie is, I mean, it's interesting because Mel Gibson, I think, does a good job. I mean, as much of a cipher as he is, you feel by the end of the movie that he has truly lost it. And there are some shots at the end where he's just going and doing. There's some shots of him alone in the car and he's backlit and he's just, there's nothing there.
Yeah,
He's just kind of like, he's gone. He's gone.
Yeah.
And I like that about him as a character, because I think that wherever the character goes from here, that those, not lack of stakes, but the fact that the stakes have been removed, he can just do whatever the fuck he wants.
The birth of an anti-hero. And
that's the thing. I mean, is he one of the top 5, top 10? I think so.
Yeah, definitely. As a character, 100%. I can't overestimate the impact of Max as a character on popular fiction and movies after the fact.
Well, and like we alluded to in the intro, Mel Gibson, I mean, as much as this made George Miller's career, this made Mel Gibson's career too.
Oh, absolutely.
Straight up.
Yeah. This is his first thing, right? He's like 23 or something here.
Yeah. It's crazy. Like for this to be your first thing, holy shit. Like, yeah. Jesus Christ almighty.
What a gift.
But that's the problem, because again, like, I don't think for me, Mel Gibson, like the highs with this franchise, does he ever even get back there as an actor? I guess with Lethal Weapon. That's like the other thing that he's kind of known for in this world.
Definitely. That and his pal Jesus.
well now. His pal Jesus. That's what it should have been called. Mel Gibson and his pal Jesus. Jesus Christ. Speaking of Jesus. Man, that and fucking Apocalypto. Apocalypto, I enjoy that movie.
I'm not saying the guy's not talented. He's just such a fucking waste of space.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean, he's been working pretty consistently since like 2010 as an actor. Yeah. I haven't seen anything he's been in, but I guess Daddy's Home 2. I did see that, which wasn't better for him being in it, that's for sure.
There is something you should say. The Continental, the series, the John Wick prequel. He's the villain in that.
Interesting.
So, spoilers, everybody. You'll really enjoy the ending if you don't like it.
Oh, fuck. And he went there. So what you're saying is Mel Gibson is totally in the next season of the show?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, he's coming back for the second season.
If they go supernatural, then yes.
Right. Yeah, it's, again, like Mel Gibson, the Mel Gibson of it all is a little hard to get to. But at some point, Mad Max and Mel Gibson are not, like, Mad Max is going to be in the new movie, but it ain't going to be Mel Gibson.
Oh, yeah, no.
It's not going to be Tom Hardy either, I'm assuming, so.
Well, the great thing about Max is that I'm comfortable with other people playing him. Like,
right.
Like, as a hardcore fan from the fucking beginning, y'all, if the actor is good, like, if they can carry it, great. Like, put him in.
And I think that's an interesting perspective, because I think a lot of fans bristle at any sort of recasting of the titular, most famous, iconic character in the franchise for which they are named for. But yet Mad Max has been able to withstand that in a way that, like, think of another franchise that has recast the lead and anybody has shown up for that second movie or third movie or whatever it is. Right. Even when a co-main character in the third Mummy movie gets recast, people didn't show up for that one because it was not great, because Rachel Weisz wasn't in it. I mean, I think the only one, maybe the highest profile one that gets away with it, but he's not a main character, is Terrence Howard and Don Cheadle.
Yeah, well, there you go. But that's, again, like you just said, not a main character, like,
Well, I guess, I would say Edward Norton and Mark Ruffalo, technically still not a main character.
Yeah, no, I mean, certainly not once he gets to Marvel.
No. Yeah, that's weird because I think for me, Mad Max is like the highest profile recasting of the lead character. But in a lot of ways,
It doesn't kind of matter, honestly. Once you get to the place we are now, Max is established. We don't need to see him being emotional about anything. He's just there to get the job done, and we're cool with that as long as he's cool.
I'm not even sure he has to be there.
Well, we'll find out.
Right. I mean, I don't anticipate Furiosa being bad.
Yeah, I can't see myself missing him in this world. Like, if Miller's behind it, and I'll go with any story George Miller wants to tell in this universe.
Right. And that's the crazy thing about all of this is where this starts versus where we are now, and the fact that it's all chronological and it's all part of the same universe. It's not a recast, it's not a legacy sequel horseshit. This is all of a piece. That's pretty crazy in this day and age, because this is 79 to 2024 and beyond, probably for at least 5 more years, because that's the other thing. On top of everything else, these kinds of movies aren't made quickly, because these kinds of movies are made for real. The way movies aren't made anymore, actually making them, actually doing large-scale practical set pieces. I haven't seen Furiosa, but I can guarantee you there's going to be some shit in that movie that's going to blow all of our minds the way Fury Road did, because of the practical nature of the effects being done and the meshing of practical and CGI.
Yeah, that's the ultimate part. But there's plenty of CGI in Fury Road. But I get the idea that on Furiosa, they're probably not going to be using the volume.
Right. Well, probably not. But that's the thing. Even in a movie like Mad Max, the original, where there are a couple. I mean, it is a car chase movie, sort of, but not really. Like, it's where we end up being is so far removed from this.
Oh, yeah.
The thing I wonder, unlike myself, if someone were to watch Fury Road and then go, I'm going to pop in Mad Max, they're going to have a hard time with this movie, right?
I don't know.
Right? Like, I don't know either. Like, I say that they might, but I also could see them not. But like, I don't know. Is it as high paced? No.
Certainly not. But then they'll have a problem with the Road Warrior if that's.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, they'll have a problem with all of them. If they think that's what Mad Max is, that's not it.
Right.
The mutability of Mad Max is what makes it so fucking cool.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like you've already mentioned, they pivoted already. The next movie has nothing to do with Mad Max. Yeah. It's literally Anya Taylor-Joy, and I've heard that the actor who plays her as a child spends like is in half of the movie. Wow. So, well, I mean, that's the other thing, and that's the thing that I'm curious, because again, haven't seen 2 and 3, but in this movie we've kind of already alluded to it. Hugh Keyes Byrne, they give him a lot of time on screen, so I'm assuming with the Chris Hemsworth character in the new movie, they're going to give him a lot of time on screen. They gave him Morton Joe a shitload of time on screen.
Mm-hmm.
They gave Toe Cutter a fair amount. I mean, to the point where it's probably Toe Cutter and Mel Gibson's movie, really.
Oh yeah, it clearly it's Toe Cutter, Mel Gibson, and Stephen Bisley.
Right? Yeah, really. Which
and the Chief, that bald fucking handlebar mustached fucking
Roger Ward. My God in heaven, what's crazy is he's not the mustachioed Nazi from Raiders of the Lost Ark, but if they were looking for a guy to cast as the other guy who's his brother, that fucking guy, and he's still kicking around, 88 years old, 6'3".
Love him.
And often did his own stunts. Roger Ward, my lord. But that's what I love about Australian filmmaking. What are you writing?
I need to sleep.
Oh, I didn't know it. I didn't know how.
It's all whited out. I know.
I was like, you could just say it. I mean, I have to edit this as is. So, Father Malone, as we kind of bring this episode to a close, which I think is probably going to be the shortest of the 4, because I'm sure there will be plenty to say on the next two. Too much, probably. For something like Mad Max and something like this franchise, what would you tell someone getting into it who has seen Fury Road but doesn't know what to expect? Because again, like, that's the question. Because a lot of people have only seen Fury Road, and that's kind of unfair to Mad Max, I think, as a franchise.
I'd say to fucking watch them in order. I'd say it's a different movie. You're going to find out where Max came from, and it's before the war. And I think that should fucking do it. And then you're either going to like the movie or you're not. Like, I could not I could not talk a 20-year-old into liking this movie, even if they've seen Fury Road. You know,
Right.
I could just say this is a fucking cool movie, and here's why.
Right.
But ultimately, you caught into a film or you don't. You know.
Yeah.
But I would definitely say if you have any interest in the Max character, then you owe it to yourself to figure out where he came from. And like I said, this is the only actual story of Mad Max.
Right.
The other is some mythic character wandering the wasteland. Who knows if any of that actually happened?
Right. And hey, you know, if at the time a reviewer, Philip Adams, condemned the film, this is one of the funniest reviews I've ever read. Had all the emotional uplift of Mein Kampf and would be, and I'm quoting him directly here, would be a quote special. Jesus, this is some harsh criticism. This is like nuclear. A special favorite of rapists, sadists, child murderers, and incipient Mansons.
So what you're seeing in the movie means that that's what it's promoting? Like,
correct.
I gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. And that's an Australian social commenter, film producer and social commenter. Yeah. That, I think though the movie did its fucking job is the way I look at it. Like if that's what you're taking away from it, that's kind of what the movie's getting at. Like the nihilism of the near future, dumb. Like,
yeah, you know, you can portray something without endorsing it. I've never understood that. You know, like I remember Dennis Hopper saying he made a film about gang activity in South Central called Colors, which is not a great movie because it's from the white officer's perspective. But I remember him in an interview at the time saying, like, people were telling him not to make the movie. He said, like, you can't make a movie about this problem because there's a real problem going on here. Like, well, that's why I'm making the movie.
Right. Well, also, what a terrible name for a movie about that subject matter, too. Just unintentionally hilarious.
Colors. What's the problem with this movie? The color.
The colors. Jesus Christ. Yeah, no, I'm with you in terms of this first Mad Max. I think anyone who has seen Fury Road owes it to themselves to see where this comes from and how much this franchise seemingly, that you've alluded to, ramps up and gets to where Fury Road is. And will continue to theoretically either ramp up or stay that insane 1,000 miles per hour pace. So, yeah. So on to the next one, on to Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior. Until then, Father Malone, where can people find you and the things that you do audio-wise?
Go over to weirdingwaymedia.com. I've got a bunch of shows over there, like Dark Destinations. It's a radio drama I write and produce, or Midnight Viewing, the horror anthology podcast, which up until recently was a bi-monthly, but now it's a weekly show. So go check that one out over at Weirding Way. And go to patreon.com/Father Malone and give me some money.
There's no pretense here. He just says it.
I like coffee, and you're listening. Let's have coffee together.
Or you pay for my cup of coffee and then fuck off, and I don't have to hear from you. That works too.
I'm in your ear.
Oh, that's fair. Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, somebody's not going to just pay you for nothing. Money for nothing. Chicks for free. As for me, you can find me also at Weirding Way Media, where I work on a whole bunch of stuff that I'm on and not on and, just guest on and whatnot. But patreon.com/culturecast is where you can find something adjacent to this, which is the Rankin' on Bond, which is every month. Richard Haddam, Mike White, and I talk all about James Bond. And Father Malone, you're going to be joining us pretty soon for some Live and Let Die action.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. Far away from what this movie is. But hey, you know what? I'm excited, but I'm even more excited to sit down and watch the next Mad Max movie. Genuinely. The way you've talked about it here, I'm genuinely excited to see where this goes, because this was good. If this was good, where are we going from here? So yeah, thank you so much for forcing me to watch Mad Max finally.
It took a lot of months of badgering you, but here we are.
Well, sometimes the badgering is needed and sometimes it's not. But in this case, I kind of feel bad for making you badger me, given how much I enjoyed it.
Well, that's okay. It's all worth it.
Yeah. And yeah, as always, we'll catch you on the next episode.